And I particularly enjoy these types of sessions because it allows us to kind of go through why, personally, I feel, but also I'm sure the students and many of the staff members feel that biochemical engineering is a discipline for the future, and it will address and solve many of the current and future challenges that we expect to face as a global society. So the title of today's session is Why I Chose to Study Biochemical Engineering. And as you can see, I'm an associate professor within the department. However, I can also answer this question because from 2004 to 2008, I was a master's in engineering in this very department, in the Department of Biochemical Engineering at UCL. So I've actually undertaken the undergraduate course. Since left UCL to pursue doctoral studies elsewhere and returned as an academic member of staff in 2017. So I can speak from both sides and both perspectives. So why did I choose to study biochemical engineering? Well, before I answer that, I think the first question is what actually is biochemical engineering? And I'll be honest, this was the first question I asked myself when I was doing A-levels at the time. So I was doing maths, chemistry, biology, and physics. And I thought to myself, well, I could do medicine, but I wasn't really intrigued by medicine. But I really enjoyed all of the individual subjects I was taking during the course of my A-levels. So I thought, what university degree program allows me to continue and develop in all of these key areas. And I came across biochemical engineering. And so for me, the first question I'm sure many of you have is, what exactly is biochemical engineering? Well, fundamentally, it's an interdisciplinary degree or an interdisciplinary subject where the focus is trying to take the principles of biotechnology, so how we can manipulate and engineer organisms for developing new therapies or developing new products and so on and so forth, but integrating that with the principles of chemical engineering. So actually, how do we manufacture, how do we scale up, how do we produce, how do we purify and develop these new products, be they healthcare products or biotechnology products or indeed sustainability products. So when you start to think about, well, what exactly is a biochemical engineer and what do they do? Well, this is a slide I like to show. And often I'm asking students if they can recognize any of the faces. And you may have some students who recognize the face on the left, who is indeed Sir Alexander Fleming. And many will know that Sir Alexander Fleming won the Nobel Prize for the discovery of penicillin. But not many people recognize that the two gentlemen next to him actually won the Nobel Prize or shared the Nobel Prize with Sir Alexander Fleming. This is Sir Howard Florey and Sir Ernst Chain, because they were the engineers working with Sir Alexander Fleming to scale up and manufacture and produce penicillin, because the amount of penicillin that Sir Alexander Fleming could produce was minuscule and not enough to treat a single person. And so we needed the manufacturing technologies to be able to manufacture penicillin. And this has now become a staple in today's society. And we have our first female biochemical engineer over there on the left, who set up and established the first manufacturing facility in the United States of America for the production of penicillin. So what exactly then do biochemical engineers make? Well, much of the work focuses extensively around new therapeutics, new biopharmaceuticals, new vaccines, antibiotics, and the emerging area of regenerative medicine, stem cell therapies, and gene therapies. But there's also a significant focus now on things like bio-based fuels, petrochemicals, biobutanol, and so on and so forth. And I think it's very poignant that I'm giving this lecture today whilst I'm working from home because of a global pandemic that is as a result of a new coronavirus, which we don't yet have a vaccine for. And many of my colleagues within the department are actually working with the likes of Oxford University to scale up and manufacture the vaccine that is being developed by Oxford University, who are now partnering with AstraZeneca. So you can see just how these global challenges, biochemical engineers are at the forefront of addressing this and making sure that we don't just have enough to produce 1, 2, or 10 vaccines, but we can produce the thousands or millions of doses of vaccines that we will actually need to really try and get a grip and a hold of the current global pandemic. So what about the impact of biochemical engineers? Well, clearly I've just highlighted quite extensively there the impact that biochemical engineers are currently having in trying to mass produce a vaccine for the new coronavirus pandemic. But when you look at the future challenges, many of these challenges relate to global issues. For example, the recycling of plastics and the waste products we're now seeing that are being dumped out in the sea. We're seeing, for example, issue around water pollution and the purity of our water sources. And also beyond the development of vaccines, how do we start to develop therapies and potential cures for things that currently have no cures or no therapies? So for example, things like spinal cord injury or Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's. And that's where novel therapeutics such as stem cells and gene therapy provide a real solution. And biochemical engineers, including myself, this is my particular area of research, are actively working in this area. So what exactly do biochemical engineers do? Well, the fundamental role is how do we mass produce and manufacture and generate not just 1, 2, or 10 doses, but thousands or millions of doses to produce enough to meet patient demand or the demand of society, be that for biofuels and bioethanol and biobutanol, or be that for something like a new vaccine or therapeutic. So it's really applying, as I mentioned at the beginning, the principles of biology, chemistry, and engineering to produce useful products and really make a change in society. So I'm going to touch on this very briefly, but how is the degree program taught? Well, many of us are used to seeing large lecture theatres and so on, and there is some lecture-based teaching. However, a significant proportion of the program is deliberately designed to put students into different scenarios, into different groups, and get them to work together as a team to try and solve and develop solutions to big problems, so that it reflects what happens in real life. It reflects how teams and companies develop solutions in the real world, and hopefully provides the students with good experience and expertise of working together to try and solve problems, and not just having a single individual who develops a solution, because that never really happens in the real world. So where do our graduates go? Well, they often tend to go into the biotech sector. So the biotechnology sector is a booming sector. And for me, it will remain so, because when you look at, for example, case in point now, there are not enough biochemical engineers, good biochemical engineers, who can support the needs of the current industry, be that new cell and gene therapy bioprocess engineers, or be it new vaccine biochemical engineers, or whatever it might be. The number of jobs available in this space and the number of companies looking to develop therapeutics is consistently increasing. So for me, it's a booming sector, and it will only increase. I mean, the UK government, in light of the pandemic, is now increasing its manufacturing capability in new therapeutics. And likewise, in places like the US and Europe, we've seen huge announcements about mass production of not just vaccines, but a whole range of different therapeutics. And that's aside from the demand and the global need for things like biofuels and so on and so forth. And as you can see there, the average graduate starting salary is between 28 and 32,000, depending on the type of degree program and role. But I think it would also be remiss for me not to mention that many of our students, because of the skills they get within the engineering programs in particular, often go into the investment banking and finance industries, because they're often hand selected, because these recruiters know that UCL engineering graduates have a high level of proficiency and are therefore highly in demand. But where possible, we want to try and encourage our students to stay within the biotech sector and have a huge impact on developing global solutions from a biotechnology perspective. So that just gives you, this slide just gives you an indication about our alumni network and outlines where many of our graduates have ended up, or what companies they're now involved in. And it's a great opportunity for us on an annual basis where we get to meet many of our alumni. So we now have a regular alumni dinner where we often have our previous students, sometimes dating back 20 or 30 years, returning back to UCL to meet with the current crop of students, but also academic members of staff. And we get to find out where they've been, and they can share their experiences and really their reflections of their current roles. So with that, I'd like to finish. My details are there on the screen, and also the undergraduate admissions tutor, Dr. Brenda Parker, her details are there as well. But I think now's probably a good time, Kim, to hand over to some of our student representatives.
Sure. Well, I'm going to start off by thanks, Qasim. That was great. We enjoyed that. I always really enjoy seeing these presentations. Get quite excited by biochemical engineering here, don't we? I'm going to introduce Praveena, who is the chair of the events committee. Praveena, perhaps you'd like to explain your route into biochemical engineering and why you chose to study it with us.
Hi Kim, hi everyone. Like Kim said, my name is Praveena and I am the current president of Crook Society with the undergraduate events committee within the department. And when I was in A-level, I studied biology, maths and chemistry. And when it came to picking my degree course, I had a little bit of difficulty. Like Kim said, I mean, like Qasim said even, I liked all of my subjects and I didn't want to drop one in like picking a degree. And that's when I came across biochemical engineering. It is an interdisciplinary course and it had everything I was looking for. It had all three sciences rolled up in there and maths, and I didn't have to compromise on any of the subjects I wanted to study. Also, I've always been interested in the science behind everyday products and how they're manufactured. And that was perfect for this degree because that's essentially what we study, with a specific focus on biological molecules and cells, which played into my interests in biology. I was also attracted to the practical and applied nature of this course. The theory that we learn in lectures, we always apply within the course, whether it be in practical lab work or when we work as a group to do a particular project. And I think that's another thing that really made me choose biochemical engineering instead of a straight science degree like biology or biochemistry, is that we don't just focus on new advancements in science, but how does that impact manufacturing and the industry as a whole. And I chose to study this course specifically in UCL because of the IEP. Essentially, this is a program where it's facilitated so you do group work within the department and with people in other engineering departments in UCL. And I personally work really well in a group environment. And so to see that an engineering course puts so much weight into group work and sharing viewpoints and opinions, I really want to study here. In terms of career paths, like Qasim said, because the degree itself is so diverse, you can go into various career paths after studying the course. It can be in research, industry, or law even. At the moment, I want to explore as many options as possible, but I'm personally interested in healthcare and the pharmaceutical industry, but I'm also looking to explore options in food processing with trying to tackle challenges of excessive farming, etc., and with special focus on cultured meat. Quite random, I know. And that's me.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to Sebastian now. Sebastian, perhaps you'd like to answer the same question. Thank you.
Hi, sure. Hi, Kim. Hi all. Yeah, I'm not sure there's much to say after Praveena and Qasim have both spoken. I was going to say much the same things. I studied math with the maths, chemistry, physics at A-levels. Although I am from the Caribbean, I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, but we have a similar academic system. And I didn't want to drop anything. And I also wanted to get biology. So it's really cool that this course advertised all that, and having completed my first year, I can say that it wasn't just advertisement. We actually do look at all these subjects, which is fantastic. And basically what the other stuff Qasim said in the presentation, you know, we have promising new treatments coming out all the time, you know, for spinal cord injury or Alzheimer's disease, things that were previously untreatable or very hard to treat. And that's amazing, but unless we can optimize manufacturing to the point where a lot of people can get it, it's just going to be in the hands of a few elite people at the top, and that's just not ideal. So this issue at the core of biochemical engineering, or one of the issues, one of the goals, to really make things accessible, resonated with me a lot. And one special thing I'll say about our department at UCL is that we have our own building and a very small department. So that really enables a lot of collaboration, and you get to meet people outside of your year group. You get to talk to professors, talk to other PhD students, and that exchange of information is really fantastic. So yeah, accessibility and multidisciplinary are the key things for biochemical engineering for me. In terms of careers, well, what I want to do is have a big impact in making things like vaccines and possibly other things like cell therapy, as Qasim mentioned, widely accessible. How I'll do this, I don't know. Project management has, I find it's quite interesting, and a lot of engineers go into this. And I think a lot of the thrusts that will enable this are going to be, it's not just the biochemical engineering side. You're going to have your finance side and your policy sides, and you need someone to kind of bring all of that together. So project management in this kind of sphere is interesting. Another thing is maybe CEO of a biotech company, because that way I could, you know, get to choose which way my company wants to go, and set my own work and kind of manage all the big issues, because it's not just working in a lab that's going to bring medicine to everybody. You have to look at government policies and regulations and all kinds of things. So CEO, maybe also a researcher, but I don't want to be too restricted. So if I could get a job in a company as a researcher that was a bit flexible, I think that's also an option for career. That's all from me.
Great, thank you very much. And I asked all our panelists to stick to 5 minutes in their presentations. They've done really well at that. Thank you very much for that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to the questions that we've had come in. Now, I know we've already had a couple. So the first one, I think it's probably a good question for Qasim. Someone's asked to explain a bit more about the BSc option and possible career paths for the BSc. Just to give you a bit of background if you're not familiar with it. We have the engineering degrees, which are 3 and 4 year, which are the B-Eng and the M-Eng. And we also have a BSc in, which Qasim will explain a little bit more about, but they've got slightly different, they've got different modulars too. Qasim, would you like to explain a bit about the difference between the BSc and the B-Eng and the M-Eng and what the career options are? Sorry, just need to activate your mic.
That would help. Thank you very much, Kim. So just to kind of recap on the degree programs that the department offers. So there's 3 main degree programs. The first is our B-Eng or M-Eng, so bachelor's or master's in engineering, which is either a 3 or 4 year program, which is the bachelor's or master's in biochemical engineering. So that was the route that I took and the route that some of our students are on. But also within the department, we offer 2 complementary BSc programs, so a bachelor's in science in bioprocessing of new medicines. Now that's actually there's 2 programs connected to that. So the first is we have a science and engineering route, which focuses more on, for those that come with a mathematical or physics background or with a science background, but we also offer a business and management route as well for that same program. And so that allows students to take more of the, for example, the project management type courses that may be suitable. So really it depends on the background of the individual. There are slightly different entry requirements, particularly based around the subjects that the student has taken. And for more information, you can have a look on our website or reach out to myself or colleagues within the department who can provide you with further information. But really, those are the 3 main undergraduate programs that we offer as part of the department. Now, how interlinked are these? They're actually quite interlinked. So for example, in the first year, in particular, in the first and second year in particular, there's some shared modules between all 3 programs. So the engineering program, the BSc Science and Engineering stream and the BSc Business and Management stream. But there are opportunities for optional modules, and also some modules that may be specific to the Business and Management stream, for example, around things like project management and so on. And obviously the engineering may focus more on the engineering type content. So there's specific content around thermodynamics and other types of subjects which are engineering related. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Before we go on to the other question that's been asked here, there's somebody did contact me before this this webinar and asked, they were asking specifically about that they asked whether without an A-level in chemistry, they're doing biology and physics, would they be disadvantaged? I think this is a good one for the whole panel, because I know that within Sebastian, Praveena, you'll have people in your cohorts who will have done chemistry, but not biology, biology, not chemistry, physics. So what it's like being in a group with different cohorts, and again, Qasim, perhaps you could give your perspective on that as well.
Sure. So perhaps if we have Praveena and Sebastian cover that question first, and then I can chime in at the end.
So I guess I'll go first. I didn't do physics. I did biology, chemistry, and maths. We get this question a lot actually when we do open days. It's a well-founded, I think, worry students have when you want to join a course and it says engineering and you haven't done physics, or it has biochem and you haven't done biology or chemistry. Essentially, it doesn't matter if you haven't done one of the sciences, because in the first year it's all about getting everyone on the same page in terms of all three sciences. So those who haven't done physics, yes, may find the physics module a little bit challenging, but it's taught in a way that you can still understand it. And then by the end of the first year, you'd be at the same level expected for you to complete the degree. Same with biology. And I think the question specifically about chemistry, yes, you look at biochemistry as a whole module in the first year. You learn it from basic and till the kind of level that you need to do second and third year modules. So I hope that puts your mind at rest, because there is enough academic support for us to understand and to learn further. Also, like Kim said, you work with people who perhaps haven't done a subject that you have done, and you haven't done a subject that they have done. So you, as a cohort, you work really well together to overcome this. Someone can help you with a coursework, you can help them with their work as well. So I think it'll be okay. This kind of learning process is, I think, what doing a degree is all about.
Yeah, not much to add to what Praveena said. Common question. Nobody really has done everything. Everyone will have a strong point and a weak point. I didn't do biology, and it just means you do a little bit extra reading in that area. And as Praveena said, we have a really nice dynamic. Everybody helps out the other people, and we share those skills, which is really great.
Yeah, I think just building on that, I mean, it's one of the things we like to stress is that this is higher education, and there will certainly be areas that you are not familiar with, or you've never covered, or you need to improve on. And that's something that we certainly try to signpost. So for example, we have certain students who perhaps haven't come in with maths if they're coming into the BSc program, the Bachelor of Science, and that can often be a worry for some students about whether that is acceptable or not, or how they can develop. And what we try to do is signpost. So during the course, so I actually teach one of the introductory modules in the first term, and I try to bring everyone up to a certain level or standard. But on top of that, on the virtual learning environment, there are resources, particularly for the mathematical type content. There's resources that I signpost to provide to students if they want to improve in certain areas and so on. So for me, I think it's, as Praveena and Sebastian have said, no one comes in with absolute expertise in every area, and we don't expect you to. I'm still learning as an academic. For me, I constantly see this as a learning journey. So I'm learning from colleagues, I'm learning from some of my students at times, and also from my researchers, because this is an ever evolving field. And I think it's important that we do try to understand the principles clearly, but the goalposts will move as our knowledge of the science and engineering improves. there will be new content to learn. So it's always a learning experience, and one that we will certainly try to support you as you go through this journey.
Great, thank you. I've got a really good question here. Thank you for this one. What is each of your favourite sections of biochemical engineering and why? So what are your favourite aspects of biochemical engineering? Sebastian, you're smiling, and I'm going to ask you this first.
What is my favorite aspect of biochemical engineering? Does the person mean the degree or the field?
I'm not sure, they haven't gone on that. So I think answer whatever inspires you most.
Well, so far I've really enjoyed just doing lots of reading and looking into all the different things we're doing. We've had several projects, and I know projects can be a drag, but one thing it does make you do, like Qasim gave us this project and he basically threw us into the deep end. I'm sorry if I'm giving out spoilers. He threw us into the deep end and had us analyze a paper that was way above our level and critique it. And it was a paper from Imperial College by top academics, and he just threw us into it. And it looked daunting, but we worked through it. And at the end of it, we started to make connections, and you just kind of get immersed in the field. So I suppose for me, I like reading. So doing lots of reading of these academic papers and getting to the point where I can start to understand terms and jargon and kind of get a feel for where the field is at, I'd say it has been pretty enjoyable for me. But there are many aspects I do enjoy.
Great, thank you very much. And just a little bit of background. In case you didn't know it, there's a healthy a sort of competition between us and Imperial in a lot of ways. There's also some amazing collaboration that goes on as well. So we work collaboratively on VaxHub and Future Targeted Healthcare as well. So there's a bit of background to that one, is that we do compete quite hard with them. Okay, Praveena, perhaps you'd like to answer that as well.
I was remembering that challenge that Sebastian was talking about. I think my favorite part of the degree has to be, actually there's two parts. Okay, so the first one is, like I said before, I love working as part of a group and working with people to address a challenge, whether, if we come up with a solution in the end, or at least spend the week trying to really answer it. And that has been my favorite part of the course, I think, because we have these sessions called scenarios, almost two in every term, and it's just challenging yourself to see if you can step up and answer these very difficult questions and do experiments and see if you can analyze the data, etc. And I really enjoyed that thoroughly, working with my cohort while doing so. And I think my second favorite thing would also have to be how diverse the course material itself is. I remember this year, I've just finished my second year, and we had a whole module on law. You wouldn't expect going into an engineering degree that you're going to do a section on law, but I found it very refreshing. The whole degree is full of surprises, and the department does it so well in the sense that they show you all the doors that can be open, and it's not just about hardcore research. It's not just about lab work. It's about so much more than that. And like I study public policy, like I think Sebastian mentioned before, the importance that of governance and government funding, etc., plays in terms of science and engineering and its influence on society. And to be able to answer these questions and even discuss them in an environment that is so full of curious people, and it makes the degree at UCL really, really worthwhile.
Yeah, and I can perhaps touch on that. So both from a student perspective, when I undertook the program, and also now as an academic, having returned to the department. So from my perspective, the fascination for me in biochemical engineering has always been the global impact that you can make. When I wanted to do a higher education program, I was really looking at where could I as an individual make the most difference. We always want to do a job where we're actually making a change in society, where we're doing something positive, we're doing something good, which is why I often joke with my students that we want them to avoid going into investment banking and stay in biotechnology. But on a serious note, for me, the impact that a student can have, a really good biochemical engineer can have, is transformational. And I think, now is case in point. We're seeing one of the biggest challenges, if not the biggest challenge in the last 50 to 100 years, where we have a pandemic of epic proportions. It's destabilized entire countries and economies, and there is no clear end in sight. And this doesn't just affect the developing world, it's affected every single country, and it's infected multiple industries. We're seeing, potentially the aviation and travel industry on the brink of collapse. We're seeing in the UK, significant damage to the retail industry. And this is when biochemical engineers and the value of biochemical engineers really shines through, because we're now expediting the manufacture of therapies, where they're going through clinical trials. We can see the need and the impact. And for me, it's always, I always like to say biochemical engineers are the underdogs and don't get the attention or the praise, but do all the hard work and deep down are the real heroes. And that's what we're seeing now. But beyond kind of using this exclusive, specific example of the pandemic, you look at, as a global society moving forward, what are some of the key challenges? You look at issues around sustainability of fossil fuels and the emergence of, or the need for new renewable types of fuels and energies. And that biochemical engineers are leading that, in terms of the development of new biofuels and so on. You look at issues around waste, pollution and recycling. You just have to watch a single David Attenborough documentary, and you see the impact of plastic waste and the need for emerging opportunities for plastic recycling and the bioplastic type economy coming about. And then also coming back to my own particular area of research, how we develop new types of therapies to treat things that we could never treat before. So how we can develop, for example, new types of gene therapy. There's a particular area of interest for me involving certain immunotherapies. So using gene modified cells, T cells, to be able to cure certain forms of cancer. And we can quite successfully say now that there are certain types of cancers, not all cancers, but certain types of cancers, such as acute lymphoblastic leukemia, where patients who have failed every other treatment option and would only effectively die of their disease have now been effectively cured because of these types of therapies. But as Sebastian mentioned, these therapies are significantly expensive. I mean, in excess of £300,000. So how do we make these therapies cheaper, more effective, higher quality and personalized, whilst reducing ultimately the barriers to access these types of therapies? And again, it's biochemical engineers leading that. So for me, when someone asks what excites you or what interests you about the area, it's the potential that we can actually have on not just our local society or economy or industry, but on the global scale. The impact we can have is unparalleled, in my opinion.
Great, thank you very much. I'm just looking to see, yeah, so great. There's one thing which, we've answered the questions that come in, but I've got something I would like to ask Sebastian, and I'll ask other people to chip into it. Sebastian, you got a Laidlaw Award for research, and I'd just like you to talk about what it's like, research activities for you as an undergraduate, because you're undergraduate in UCL, but you're taking part in actual research. Could you explain a bit about what that award was, what kind of research you're doing, and then I'll ask Qasim Praveena to talk a bit more about that, if that's okay.
So the Laidlaw Scholarship, just briefly, it's a rich guy, Lord Laidlaw. He set up this fund. It operates in a couple of universities and seeks to just empower young scholars the opportunity to do some research make a difference, and really give them skills and connect them to the network, and it looks good on your CV too. I wanted to do it to get some practical lab skills because employers love that. And it's only open to first years. So you can apply in your first year, you can get it. There were no projects, so you do a summer project basically for 6 weeks. And you can either do one they have on the list, but there were none that I liked. So I proposed my own, and I asked someone who, again, I really have to mention this, the willingness of the staff. I actually asked a lecturer who had only taught me twice to supervise me, and she said yes. And I'm exceedingly grateful because it would have been impossible without her. And so I did a project with her. It was supposed to be growing stem cells, mesenchymal stem cells. We didn't get to grow it because the lab had to close down. So instead, I did some modeling of stem cells with some math models, like differential equations, which we also look at a bit later on in the course, I think. So yeah, I modeled those. I got data from a PhD student, plotted it, investigated models, did some more research. I had some papers from Imperial. One of them was an author on the paper I did for Qasim a while back. So it all links together sooner or later. Yeah, and it was very fun doing the research. Got a lot of practical skills like MATLAB, how to do those fancy graphs you see in academic papers with this particular type of software. And it was great fun.
Great, thank you very much. Praveena, could you talk a little bit about, well, you're in your second year, so a little bit about, you know, your experience of engagement with research in the department.
Hi.
Hi.
Research, lab work. In the first year, I think it's very much kind of introducing us to a lab and what things we can do in the lab, small activities. But I think in second year, it really stepped up. We had a chance to, our labs were down in the pilot plant. You can investigate different equipment in the pilot plant, and we had essentially each lab session was focusing on a particular equipment and how it worked, how it functioned, and we'd investigate that. And we worked closely with some PhD students who helped us through each of the practical, and they'd be the one marking our work as well. So it was really nice to have that interaction with them. And I think that's one of the key things that you take away from the lab sessions is working with the PhD students, because they have so much knowledge, asking them all your questions, and they're so willing to answer and help you out. I think really there was a highlight of practical sessions. But I have to say my favorite one was the pilot plant week. We had a project. It was actually, I think mine was from students working under Qasim, and to do T-cell research, and I had so much fun during the entire project. We worked very, very closely with these two PhD students to essentially do experiments that were linked to their particular research, and to have the chance to pick their brains essentially and get all this information from them was so much so valued. Really, it made us understand complicated lab work that you never would have thought you would do yourself. I think that was definitely my highlight in terms of practical research, because you see how skills you learn in your first year and the beginning of your second is used to do kind of take great steps in science.
That was great, thank you. Qasim, perhaps you give a bit of context about, you know, as an academic engaging with undergraduates and bring them into a research environment, what that meant for you when you're an undergraduate and now that you're the other side of the fence, so to speak.
Sure. So I think when I was an undergraduate, I was really inspired by a former, actually I say a former member of staff. He's actually still a member of staff, but is now chief scientific officer also of a startup gene therapy company in the US called AvroBio. So it was Professor Chris Mason who, during the course of my degree program, inspired me as an individual to consider applying my biochemical engineering knowledge to the emerging area of stem cell and regenerative medicine at the time, and in gene therapy. And it was that, I would say, that passion that he exuded that really kind of inspired me to think, well, hold on a minute, there's an opportunity here and I can use my skills, and it goes beyond research. I'm, even in my own research activity now as an academic, I don't consider myself in the truest sense an academic, because I see my research very much at the cutting edge industry translational level. I'm not particularly interested in basic research. So my research projects and the work that I do aren't looking at, some novel molecule or anything like that. It's about, okay, how can we take something that currently exists but can't be manufactured, or manufactured cost effectively, or currently is only available at certain scales? How can we develop that and move that forward and make it such that it can be mass produced and made effective and made readily accessible for the patients that need them? So for me, what I try and do now as an academic is try and bring that to the students. So Sebastian mentioned earlier about one of the exercises that I give to the first year students, and Sebastian's absolutely right. I deliberately throw the students in at the deep end. It's one of their, effectively within their first term, giving them a research paper from a reputable source. And what I'm getting the students to do is critique it. So these are first year undergrads who are reading a novel research paper. So there's different papers given to different groups, and it's their job to be able to unpick and critique that paper. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to, pick out all of the issues with the paper or the problems or the areas of fault. Sometimes the critique is saying, actually, they've done this very well, and it's now been established and they've taken this forward. But it's bringing those skills to the forefront, because that skill of being able to critique, analyze, explain, and discuss is applicable whether you're an engineer, whether you're a scientist, whether you're a politician. Being able to really extract key information, unpick the data, and make some recommendations or conclusions is important, irrespective of what your background is or what your role is. And I think the more students can pick up these skills, particularly in the early stages of their degree program, the more likely they are to succeed, not just in the degree program, but moving forward. And that's the way I view the degree program. It's providing you with a skill set that will allow you to succeed. And as I said, many of our students go into the finance industry and do very, very well there, because they have a unique skill set which not necessarily every other university or every other degree program provides.
Great, thank you. I've had a question come in. I just want to quickly check. Somebody's asked about how difficult it is to find a job as a, we're going to answer it as biochemical engineer. You have said biomedical engineer. It's a typo that happens all the time. We often get emails for biomedical engineering. But if you're asking about biochemical engineering, we'll answer that. If it's, if it's biomedical engineering, I'm afraid my colleagues in another department will have to answer your question. But Qasim, I think it's good to differentiate, because you've already spoken about careers in related subjects, so consultancy, finance, really critical areas. But as a biochemical engineer, how difficult is it to get a job as a biochemical engineer? In London, actually, this is an interesting one.
So the question is specific to London, and I'll answer that specific question, but also extrapolate a little as well. So how difficult is it to get a job in biochemical engineering? Well, obviously it depends on the individual, and it depends on how and what they're looking to do. But and I have to be careful, because I am slightly biased. But personally, I feel that there are some fantastic opportunities out there, and they're only going to increase. And I say that knowing that many of my researchers and undergraduate students have gone on to some excellent positions in biochemical engineering type roles or related roles, so bioprocess engineering or cell therapy scientist and so on. And I've seen it time and time again, to the point where I'm actually worried for my own research activity, because many of my best postdoctoral researchers or PhD students are being picked and headhunted and recruited by some of the fantastic companies that are now emerging. But just to give you some idea, UCL as a university has spun out at least 10 different cell and gene therapy companies. So cell and gene therapy is a particular area of interest for me as an individual researcher, but also within the department, because it's an area of biochemical engineering which is expanding rapidly at the moment. So cell and gene therapy looks at how we can produce new types of therapeutics using gene editing technologies or using stem cells and so on. So UCL has spun out, as an institution alone, 10 different companies. Some of the most famous include the likes of Autolus, Orchard Therapeutics, and Achilles and Mira Therapeutics. And these companies are recruiting like crazy at the moment. And I say that knowing that I've had an email from one of my colleagues from one of the companies saying, can you share this job advert around? We've got 10 positions available that we need to fill ASAP. And so that's the type of knowledge and awareness that I have at the moment, that there are a number of different roles that need to be filled. And that's just one company, but I know the same is apparent at many other companies because of the industrial collaborations and contacts that we have at the moment. So in terms of being able to get a role, there are a number out there. And this also includes the established blue chip biopharmaceutical companies like GSK, AstraZeneca, the likes of Pfizer, UCB, Lonza, and so on and so forth. So there's a number of large companies as well as emerging SMEs, which are looking to recruit good biochemical engineers. In London specifically, so I can say Autolus are based in London. So they have facility in White City as well as in Stevenage, which isn't too far from London, but also companies like Quell Therapeutics, Mira, and Orchard all have facilities in London. And then there's a number of other companies that have London bases as well. So in London specifically, there are quite a few. Obviously across the country, there are also many companies that are doing work in this space. And then internationally, I think is the key thing. The one great thing about this degree program is that it's recognized internationally. Students who undertake the MEng or the BEng can become accredited chartered engineers and chartered scientists. And there are opportunities available around the world. Many of my former students have gone into places like Singapore, Australia, clearly the US is a big employer, many parts of Europe, and we're now establishing strong connections with companies and emerging activity in places like the Middle East and in places like India and China. So there's a huge amount of international scope with these types of programs as well.
Great, thank you very much. We don't have any more questions pending. I've gone through the questions that people had sent to me in advance. So I'm just going to quickly say that when we come to the end of this, I'll share a link to a questionnaire. So if you've got a few moments at the end, just go through to that page and let us know what you thought, if there's anything we can do to improve it. I'm just going to ask if any more questions are coming through. Just a reminder, this is being recorded. I'll share a link afterwards so you can review it if there's any parts that you missed. Also, if there are any questions that occur to you afterwards and you think, oh, I really wish I'd asked that, please, by all means, send them through to me. I'll be happy to field them to Qasim or anyone else in the team who might be able to answer it for you. If it's anything to do with admissions, we've got a team that deal with that and I can forward it on to them as well. So what I'll do is we'll wait just a couple more moments. And I think what I'm going to do is, just as a finishing off, just to ask people to conclude the session, I'm going to ask if anyone's got any particular COVID-related stories, because we've had some very interesting activities related to our department and related to engineering as well generally. But I'm just going to ask if Sebastian, Praveena, Qasim, whether there's anything that's particularly inspired you about what the department's done to respond to the COVID crisis. And if any questions come in the meantime, we'll answer those, but I think we'll end on that. I'm going to throw it to Praveena because your screen is off and I thought I'd chuck it there first of all. Praveena, are there any news stories that are regarding COVID related to our department that you found interesting?
Well, like you already said, everyone I think in our department is following what UCL is doing, particularly biochemical engineering is doing in this current situation, because I think we even had a question from one of I was in my minor and someone said just before everything got cancelled, he said, so have you cured it yet? And I was like, wait, what? So I think we have a lot of expectation on us as a department and as I think an industry in general to come up with that quick response. They just suppose we just been hiding it somewhere. And I think it's really nice to follow the story with the vaccine in Oxford. It's often shared. I don't know, others, Martina always tells us what kind of progress is going on over there, and we often share kind of links from talks coming out of Oxford to do with the vaccine, so we can all be on the same page regarding that. So in terms of the science front, it's a very interesting time for the department to see what we can do in the current situation. So there's always new stories. But I think what I'd like to say, though, is as a department, it hasn't just been focused on that. The department's worked really, really hard in keeping undergrads in the loop on such a difficult situation, what it means for modules, what it means for next year, what it means for actually studying in a coronavirus situation. How do you do a degree in this time? So I think our department's done really, really well in keeping everyone in the loop, making sure everyone knows what is going on, how decisions are being made. We had various town halls and meetings throughout the crisis to make sure everyone within the department, particularly the students, can put their mind at rest, because it threw up all their grades, it threw up any preparation they were making for exams. So in terms of internal support, it has been amazing coming from the department.
That's great, thank you. Sebastian?
Yeah, I can't say I've had any personal scientific contribution to COVID. I do think it's exciting. I vividly remember one time when the same, it's a professor named Martina. She came in a bit late to one of our classes on, I think, probably fluid flow. And she said, oh, sorry, I just got off the call with Oxford. We're talking about the virus, the new vaccine. And it just kind of, it hit home the message like, wow, we're at the heart of where all this is taking place. And I think being in a place like that, it opens up the opportunities, the doors for a lot of opportunities, depending on where you want to go. So that was very exciting. And I think the ability to read scientific papers has helped with the new reports coming out, the ability to sift through information, to understand the stages of a vaccine, the clinical trials. So I can follow that a bit better, I think, for sure.
Thanks. Qasim,
so I can perhaps comment in a bit more detail as we start to wrap up on the work that the vaccine or work around COVID and what it's entailed. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen. This was an article that I'm showing that myself and Professor Martina Micheletti wrote for the conversation. So feel free to read it in your own time, and I'm sure Kim can send a link through to the article. But we highlight this was written back in, I think, April, May. So within the first 2 or 3 months of the coronavirus emerging, certainly in the Western world, and as vaccine development started to really gather pace, but kind of highlighting how vaccine development and what's involved in developing a new vaccine and what the processes might be and where are we currently at. And obviously things have progressed since then as well. And I think what we're now seeing and what inspires me is the global attention that there now is on trying to develop solutions to what is a global problem. And when I look at those involved in leading the research, it's colleagues that I've worked with, it's collaborators around the country and internationally. We're seeing some fantastic work by colleagues at Moderna Therapeutics in the US who are leading some of this key work and developing new types of vaccines. I mean, that's the other thing we're now seeing is it's a good time for innovation. We're seeing for the first time ever, potentially an RNA vaccine being approved by the US FDA and the EMA. There's never been an RNA vaccine ever approved, and we now have 3 or 4 being developed. Imperial is developing one, as well as Moderna, who I think are now in phase 2, moving into phase 3 clinical trials of their RNA vaccine. So there are some exciting times technically and scientifically, But at the same time, I'm always, taking into account that this is a global problem. And my worry is that as we move into the next 2 to 5 years, with or without a vaccine, the global impact and the global disruption will be significant. And I think, we'll have to wait and see how significant that really is. But again, my thoughts are immediately turning to, well, how can biochemical engineers address or resolve some of those issues that may arise in the future? And I think this is an industry that is not immune or won't suffer issues as a result of what will inevitably a global recession. But at the same time, it's an industry that can ignite change and ignite, I think, the way we look at particularly STEM-based subjects. And as graduates moving forward, the types of roles and opportunities that people like Sebastian and Praveena will move into, and really will be leading some of these, the activity around some of these significant issues in the future. I'll leave it there.
Right, we've had a really good, but really quite tough question coming at the very end. So so Qasim, before you go, what's the most challenging part of being a biochemical engineering degree as a professor?
So as a professor, it's an interesting question. I noticed the question also mentions students, so I'll hand over to Praveena and Sebastian about the student. As a professor, really for me, it's keeping up to date with everything that's happening. And that's why I say, I'm constantly learning. I'm learning from students, I'm learning from researchers, and my PhD and postdoctoral researchers, but also from colleagues and what's happening in the industry. So in terms of what's most challenging, it's probably keeping up to date and trying to ensure that the work we're doing, and this is a personal thing for me, the research work that I'm doing, I want to see it making a difference. That's a personal thing for me. If the change is going to happen in 50 years, that doesn't excite me as much as if I can see actually this could make a difference or change in the next 2 to 5 years. So for me, it's how do I ensure the relevancy and the currency of the work that I'm actually doing.
Thank you. Sebastian, what's the biggest challenge for you?
Sorry. Biggest challenge. Some of the tests can be, relatively challenging. I think they are right once you study well. I suppose, especially doing that project, the Laidlaw summer project. I think the hard part is when you're doing a project and you just kind of have a creative stump and you don't know where to go. So it's not that you don't want to do the work, but you just don't know what direction the work should be in. And also, Qasim mentioned keeping up to date. I think for me, it would be just getting to date, because people just throw around all these words and you've never actually touched these things. You've never seen them for yourself. And you have to kind of get yourself in that world. And they're talking about, this medium to grow cells and you leave it here in this reactor, and they just throw around all these things. And I think just getting into that sometimes without being able to be in a lab can be challenging, but it is rewarding once you do start to make sense of some of the terms and techniques that I just mentioned.
Okay, Praveena, would you like to finish off this?
When I first decided I wanted to do biochemical engineering because it had engineering in it, I presumed there's going to be a right answer to questions, It's going to have a right answer. But like Qasim said, everything is so, in our department, it is cutting edge. Like, they have come up with a new method to do something, and then that's what we'd study. So the right answer isn't out there already. And that leads us, there's a lot of gray areas when you have to, love this word now, assume stuff. You do so many assumptions. I never thought I would ever assume so much in an engineering degree. But I think that has been the most challenging part for me, because I think once you come out of A-level, where everything is kind of, that the science you learn at A-level has kind of been there for a long time, so it's been very accepted. So you don't question it, that there is a right answer there. But when you go into degree level, the science you're learning now is questioned, because actually someone came up with this, and then someone came up with something else. And that's how you learn science at university, I think, because it's ever changing, and people ask new questions, more detailed questions all the time. So being in that environment is a change coming from A level to university. And I think that has been the most challenging part, especially in my first year and a little bit of second year. But I think in second year, it's not really that you know the answer. You're just you go with the flow much more, and you're much you just accept that assumptions have to be made sometimes. So I think that's been the most challenging part so far for me.
That's brilliant. Thank you. So that's wrapping it up. Thank you for thank you everyone who's attended. Thank you for the questions. They were really good. I really enjoyed going through those questions, and as I said, there'll be a recording afterwards if you want to review any of this. But finally, thank you very much, Sebastian. Thank you, Praveena. Thank you, Qasim. And I hope you have a great afternoon, and I hope that in the future some of you choose to join us at Biochemical Engineering. So goodbye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.